The massive space station hung in the purple glow of Nexus Prime like a steel flower. Valerian Military Academy stretched across 3 kilometers of metal and glass, its spinning sections creating artificial gravity for the thousands of beings inside. Ships came and went from the docking bays, bringing cadets from across the galaxy to train as the Federation's next generation of military leaders. Nari Kim pressed her face against the transport window as they approached. At 19, she was small by human standards but built like a weapon. Her black hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her dark eyes missed nothing. The other passengers on the transport gave her plenty of space. Most had never seen a human before, and the stories they heard made them nervous. The docking procedure took an hour. When Nari finally stepped off the transport, the station's artificial atmosphere hit her like a wall. It was too clean, too perfect. No wind, no weather, no danger. Everything her body expected from air was missing. She took a deep breath and reminded herself this was temporary. 3 years of training, then back to real space where humans belonged. The orientation hall was enormous. 300 new cadets filled the space, representing 47 different species from across the Federation. Nari had studied them all during the journey, but seeing them in person was different. The Vorthak towered over everyone else, their crystal-like skin catching the light as they moved. Their voices created music when they spoke, each word a perfect note. The Threnodi looked like walking trees with 4 arms and wise eyes. They were scholars and philosophers known for their patience and deep thinking. The strangest were the Quilari. They floated above the ground like jellyfish made of light. Their bodies pulsed with colors that changed based on their emotions. Right now, most were showing curious blues and greens as they watched the new arrivals. Nari found the small group of human cadets near the back. There were only 12 of them out of 300. Minho Park waved her over with a relieved smile. At 21, he was the oldest human cadet and had appointed himself their unofficial leader. His family had military connections that helped him navigate the politics of the academy. "Rough trip?" he asked in Korean as she joined them. "Long," Nari replied. She nodded to the others. Unyo was quiet and thoughtful, always watching and learning. Hana had the quick hands of an engineer and could fix anything. The rest were good people, but she could see the weight they all carried. Being human here meant being different, and different was dangerous. The orientation began with speeches from faculty members. Dean Mordeth spoke first, his 4 Threnodi arms moving gracefully as he talked about honor and service. His words were beautiful, but Nari noticed how his eyes skipped over the human section. Admiral Kestar floated above the podium, her Quilari body pulsing with formal gold patterns as she welcomed the new cadets. Then Professor Yeon stepped forward. She was human, in her 40s, with the bearing of someone who had seen real combat. Her presence changed the mood in the room. The alien cadets shifted uncomfortably, while the humans straightened up. She spoke about duty and sacrifice, but her words carried weight that the others lacked. She had bled for the Federation and earned her place through actions, not politics. "The galaxy is not a safe place," Professor Yeon said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Peace is maintained by those willing to fight for it. You are here to learn how to be those people. Some of you come from worlds where survival is a daily challenge. Others come from paradise planets where conflict is theoretical. Both perspectives have value. Learn from each other." After orientation, the cadets were assigned to dormitories. The humans were spread out, 1 or 2 per section. Nari found herself in Block 7 with mostly Vorthak and Threnodi students. Her room was small but functional, with a bed, desk, and storage unit. The walls were plain metal, and the single window looked out at the gas giant below. Her roommate was a Vorthak named Kira. She was tall and elegant, with skin that shifted from blue to purple as she moved. She spoke in musical tones that were pleasant to hear but hard to understand. Kira was polite but distant, the way someone might be around a dangerous animal they didn't quite trust. The first week of classes was a shock. Everything moved at a different pace than Nari expected. The alien students approached problems with patience and careful thought. They would spend hours discussing the ethical implications of a tactical decision. They analyzed every angle, considered every consequence, and sought solutions that minimized harm to all parties. In strategic analysis, Professor Veltai taught them about civilized warfare. This was the Federation's approach to conflict, precise, measured, and focused on achieving objectives with minimal casualties. Wars were fought with surgical strikes and political pressure rather than overwhelming force. Victory was measured not just in military success but in how quickly normal relations could be restored afterward. Nari found it frustrating. Her human instincts told her that war was about survival, not philosophy. When someone tried to kill you, you killed them first and sorted out the ethics later. But she kept these thoughts to herself and tried to learn. Combat training was different. Here the humans excelled and everyone knew it. Earth was classified as a death world by Federation standards. The gravity was crushing, the weather was violent, and every ecosystem was full of predators. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, capable of tracking prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. They were adapted for violence in ways that most species found disturbing. During the first sparring session, Nari was paired with a Threnody named Kremal. He was twice her size and had 4 arms to her 2, but when they began, she moved like water around his attacks. Her reflexes were faster, her balance was better, and her strikes found targets he didn't know he was leaving open. The match lasted 30 seconds before the instructor called a halt. "Excellent technique, Cadet Kim," the instructor said, but Nari could see the discomfort in his eyes. The other students watched her with a mixture of awe and fear. She had won, but she had also proven something they didn't like about humans. The whispers started after that. Students would stop talking when she walked by. She heard fragments of conversations about primitive instincts and barely controlled aggression. Some cadets went out of their way to avoid her in the corridors. Others stared openly, like she was an exhibit in a zoo. Minho found her in the observation lounge one evening, staring out at the stars. The gas giant below them swirled with storms that could swallow entire planets. It was beautiful and violent like everything in the real universe. "Don't let them get to you," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "I'm not," Nari replied, but they both knew it was a lie. "They're scared," Minho continued. "They've built this perfect little civilization where everything is clean and orderly. Then we show up and remind them that the universe doesn't care about their rules." "Maybe they're right," Nari said quietly. "Maybe we don't belong here." Minho was quiet for a long moment. "My grandfather fought in the border wars," he finally said. "Human ship, mixed crew. When the Kreks attacked, it was the humans who held the line while the others evacuated. They called us barbarians then too, but when the shooting started, they were glad we were there." Nari thought about that as she watched the storms rage below. The Federation had been at peace for 50 years, but peace was fragile. Somewhere out there, threats were building that would test everything these aliens believed about civilized warfare. When that time came, they would need soldiers who understood that sometimes survival mattered more than philosophy. But for now, she was stuck in a classroom full of beings who thought violence was a character flaw, rather than a tool. She would learn their ways and try to find her place among them. But she would not apologize for being human. The stars outside the window burned cold and distant, and Nari Kim prepared herself for the battles ahead. 3 weeks into the semester, the problems began in earnest. It started small. Nari's meal card would stop working at random times, forcing her to go hungry until she could get it fixed. Her schedule would be accidentally changed, making her late for classes. Study materials would disappear from her room, only to turn up days later in random locations. At first, she thought it was just bad luck. Space stations were complicated, and computer glitches happened, but when she mentioned it to Minho during their weekly human cadet meeting, she discovered she wasn't alone. "Same things happening to all of us," Junho said quietly. He was the most observant of their group, always watching and listening. "Started right after combat training last week." Hana nodded, her engineer's mind already working on the pattern. "Too coordinated to be random. Someone's messing with our system's access." "Any idea who?" Minho asked, though they all had their suspicions. The answer came during Ethics of Command class the next day. Professor Thex taught the course, a Vorthak philosopher who believed deeply in nonviolent solutions. He was discussing a historical case study when he posed a question to the class. "Cadet Kim," he said, his crystal features reflecting the classroom lights. "In the Altair incident, human forces ended a siege by using overwhelming firepower that resulted in significant civilian casualties. How do you justify this action from a modern Federation perspective? It was clearly a trap. The Altair incident was a controversial case from 50 years ago, before the Federation's current rules of engagement. Human commanders had made a difficult choice under impossible circumstances, saving thousands of lives at the cost of dozens. But by current Federation standards, it was considered a war crime. The human commanders were facing a time-critical situation, Nari answered carefully. They had incomplete information and limited options. They chose the action most likely to save the maximum number of lives. But at what cost? Professor Thex pressed. Surely a more civilized approach would have been to negotiate, to find a solution that didn't require such barbaric methods. The word barbaric hung in the air like a challenge. Nari felt every eye in the classroom on her. This wasn't really about the Altair incident. It was about whether humans belonged in the Federation's military at all. Sometimes negotiation isn't possible, she said, keeping her voice level. When someone is shooting at you, philosophy doesn't stop bullets. But that's exactly the primitive thinking that we must move beyond, Professor Thex replied, his musical voice carrying clearly to every student. Violence is the resort of the uncivilized mind. A truly advanced being finds better ways. Behind Professor Thex, Nari could see some of the alien students nodding. Thexaval, a young Vorthak noble, was smiling. He was tall even for his species, with skin that shifted between gold and silver when he was pleased. His family had significant political influence in the Federation, and he carried himself like someone who expected the universe to bend to his will. After class, Thexval approached her with several other students. Kretoan was with him, a massive Threnodi whose family had lost territory during human expansion into their sector. Krilox floated beside them, his jellyfish-like body pulsing with hostile red patterns. Another Vorthak, completed the group. Interesting discussion today, Thexval said, his voice creating harmonious echoes in the corridor. Though I wonder if you truly understand the Federation's values. I understand them fine, Nari replied, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Do you? Kretoan rumbled, his forearms crossing in what Nari knew was an aggressive posture for his species. Or are you just pretending to be civilized while waiting for an excuse to show your true nature? My true nature is to serve the Federation, Nari said. Same as yours. Kalox's body flashed angry red. Deathworlders don't serve. They conquer. They destroy. Your kind shouldn't be here. But we are here, Nari said quietly. Get used to it. She walked away before they could respond, but she could feel their eyes following her down the corridor. The message was clear. They wanted her gone, and they were willing to work together to make it happen. The harassment escalated over the following week. Nari would find her room unsealed when she returned from classes, her belongings scattered. Her computer access would be restricted, cutting her off from study materials. Messages would appear on her personal comm system, anonymous threats telling her to leave before something bad happened. The other human cadets reported similar problems. Someone was coordinating a campaign to make their lives miserable, but when they tried to report it to Academy security, they were told there was no evidence of systematic harassment. Each incident, taken alone, could be explained as a technical glitch or student prank. Lieutenant Commander Gina Lee was caught in the middle. As head of tactical instruction and the senior human faculty member, she was the natural person for the human cadets to turn to. But she was also under intense political pressure from the alien faculty. Nari found her in her office one evening, staring at a stack of reports. Commander Lee was in her 30s, with the lean build of someone who had spent years in shipboard military service. She had earned her position through combat experience and brilliant tactical thinking, but Academy politics was a different kind of warfare. The complaints about you are getting more frequent, Commander Lee said without preamble when Nari entered. Professor Thex says you're disruptive in class. Dean Morda thinks you're encouraging aggressive behavior in the other human students. What do you think? Nari asked. Commander Lee was quiet for a long moment. I think you're being targeted because you make them uncomfortable. Your existence here challenges their worldview. They've convinced themselves that they've evolved beyond violence, and then you show up and demonstrate that their peace only exists because people like us are willing to fight for it. So what do? Keep your head down. Don't give them any excuse to escalate this. The human exchange program is fragile. If they can prove that humans are inherently violent or disruptive, they'll end it. No more human cadets, no more human officers in Federation service. Nari understood the stakes, but keeping her head down was getting harder. The harassment was constant now, and her tormentors were getting bolder. They would bump into her in corridors, spill drinks on her in the cafeteria, and make loud comments about dangerous Deathworlders whenever she was in earshot. The breaking point came during advanced strategic planning. The class was working through a complex scenario involving multiple species and conflicting interests. Nari had been quiet for most of the session, trying to follow Commander Lee's advice. But when Professor Yan asked for analysis of the tactical situation, she couldn't help herself. "The outer colonies are vulnerable to raiding attacks," she said, pointing at the holographic display. "The Federation response time is too slow. By the time reinforcements arrive, the raiders will be gone with whatever they came for." "What do you suggest?" Professor Yan asked. "Forward deployment. Small, fast response units stationed in the border systems. When raiders show up, hit them immediately, before they can complete their objectives." "That's very aggressive," HFY interjected from across the room. "What about collateral damage? What if the raiders are just desperate refugees looking for supplies?" "Then you adapt your response," Nari replied. "But you don't let them attack helpless civilians while you're debating philosophy." "Spoken like a true Deathworlder," HFY said with obvious disdain. "Violence first, questions later." "Protection first," Nari corrected. "Questions can wait until people are safe." "And who decides what safe means?" Creedon asked. "You? Should the galaxy trust human judgment about when violence is necessary?" The challenge was clear. Nari felt her temper rising, but she forced herself to stay calm. "The galaxy should trust the judgment of people who understand what real danger looks like." "Ah, yes, the famous human expertise in danger," Killox pulsed sarcastically. "Tell me, how many wars has your species started? How many planets have you depopulated? How many have we saved?" Nari shot back, her patience finally cracking. "How many Federation worlds are still free because human ships held the line?" "Enough," Professor Yan said sharply. "This is a classroom, not a debate hall. Cadet Kim, your tactical analysis is sound but could use more consideration of diplomatic alternatives. Cadet HFY, personal attacks have no place in academic discussion." But the damage was done. Nari had lost her temper and proven their point about human aggression. She could see the satisfaction in HFY's crystalline features, the approval in his followers' eyes. They had successfully provoked her into showing her true nature. After class, Minho caught up with her in the corridor. "You need to be more careful," he said. "They're trying to set you up." "I know," Nari replied. "But I can't just sit there while they insult our entire species." "Yes, you can," Minho said firmly. "Because if you don't, they win. They get rid of all of us." That night, Nari lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling. Her roommate Kira was out at some Vorthak cultural event, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She was trapped in an impossible situation. If she fought back, she proved they were right about humans being violent. If she didn't fight back, they would keep pushing until she broke. Outside her window, Nexus Prime continued its eternal storm, and Nari Kim prepared for the battle. The Advanced Combat Dynamics class met in the Academy's zero-gravity training dome, a massive sphere lined with sensors and safety equipment. Today's exercise was shipboarding scenarios. Teams of 5 would navigate through a simulated enemy vessel, neutralizing threats and securing objectives. It was one of the most dangerous training exercises, which was why it required perfect team coordination. Nari arrived early and checked the day's team assignments. Her heart sank when she saw the list. Due to what the scheduling system claimed were random assignment protocols, she was teamed with HFY, Kretoan, Quilox, and Vorthak, exactly the 4 aliens who had been making her life miserable for weeks. She considered asking for a reassignment, but that would look like cowardice. Besides, they were all Academy cadets. Whatever their personal feelings, they were supposed to be professionals. Surely they wouldn't do anything dangerous during a training exercise. Instructor Kelnos, a veteran Quilari with battle scars across his translucent body, briefed the teams on their objectives. Each team would enter the simulated ship through different airlocks and work their way to the bridge. The exercise would test their ability to work together under stress, adapt to changing situations, and complete their mission without unnecessary casualties. "Remember," Instructor Kelnos said, his body pulsing with serious blue patterns, "this is a training exercise, but the dangers are real. Stay with your teams, follow safety protocols, and trust your equipment. The simulation will throw unexpected challenges at you. How you adapt as a team will determine your success." The team suited up in light combat gear. The training weapons were fitted with safety systems that would register hits without causing real damage, but they could still deliver painful shocks to simulate injury. The zero-gravity environment made everything more challenging. Cadets who were graceful on solid ground became clumsy and disoriented when up became down. Nari's team gathered at Airlock 7. The simulated ship beyond was dark and filled with obstacles designed to test their skills. Floating debris, automated defensive systems, and narrow passages would force them to work together if they wanted to succeed. Standard formation, HFY said, taking command without consulting the others. Kretoan and I take point. Vorthak covers our rear, Quilox provides reconnaissance. The human follows behind and tries not to get in the way. Nari bit back her first response. I have training in shipboarding. I can take point or provide cover. We'll handle the dangerous work, Kretoan rumbled, his forearms checking his equipment. Deathworlders aren't known for their teamwork. They entered the airlock and the simulation began. The artificial ship was a maze of corridors and chambers, lit only by emergency lighting. Debris floated freely in the zero gravity, creating obstacles that had to be navigated carefully. The team moved forward in the formation HFY had dictated, with Nari trailing behind. For the first 10 minutes, everything went according to plan. They encountered simulated enemy positions and dealt with them efficiently. Nari followed orders and stayed in position, even when she could see better approaches that the team was missing. She was trying to be a good teammate despite their obvious hostility. The trouble started when they reached the ship's central section. The corridor here was wider, with multiple levels connected by maintenance shafts. It was also darker, with only a few emergency lights creating pools of dim illumination. Perfect for an ambush, reconnaissance sweep, HFY ordered. Quilox floated ahead, his bioluminescent body pulsing with scanning patterns as he checked for threats. After a few minutes, he returned with the all-clear signal. Section's clean, he reported. No active defensive systems, no automated sentries. They moved into the darker area with Nari bringing up the rear as usual. The safety regulations required all team members to keep their recording devices active during exercises. But as they entered the shadows, HFY made an unexpected announcement. Recording pause, he said, touching his chest unit. We need to discuss modified tactics for the next section. The others immediately followed suit, disabling their recorders. Nari hesitated. This was against regulations. But when 4 pairs of alien eyes turned toward her expectantly, she reluctantly complied. She didn't want to be the one who broke team unity over a minor rule violation. Good, HFY said, his voice taking on a different tone. Now we can speak freely. That was when Nari realized she had made a terrible mistake. In the dim emergency lighting, she could see the change in their postures. Kretoan's 4 arms were positioned for combat, not navigation. Quilox's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to aggressive reds and oranges. Vorthak was moving to block the exit behind them. Time to teach the Deathworlder some manners, HFY said, his crystal features catching the emergency lights. They had planned this. The random team assignment, the movement into the dark section, the disabled recorders, all of it was coordinated. They intended to hurt her and make it look like a training accident. In zero gravity with no witnesses and no recordings, they could claim anything. 4 against 1 isn't very sporting, Nari said, trying to buy time while she assessed the situation. 4 civilized beings against 1 savage animal, Kreton corrected. Seems fair to me, Quilox pulsed with malicious humor. Don't worry, we'll make sure you survive. Wouldn't want to cause an interstellar incident, but you'll spend enough time in the medical bay to reconsider your career choices. They were confident. 4 against 1, in an environment where their superior size and multiple limbs gave them every advantage. What they didn't understand was that they had just made the worst possible mistake. They had turned a civilized training exercise into a survival situation. And survival was what humans did better than anyone else in the galaxy. HFY attacked first, launching himself across the corridor with a training blade extended toward her torso. He was fast for a Vorthak, but his movement was telegraphed and predictable. Nari twisted aside, grabbed his extended arm and used his own momentum to slam him into the bulkhead with devastating force. The crack of his arm breaking was audible even in the simulated ship's thin atmosphere. Kretoan came next, his forearms reaching out to grapple her in what should have been an unbreakable hold. But Nari dropped low, sweeping his legs while driving her elbow up into his solar plexus equivalent. The combination sent him spinning helplessly through the zero gravity, gasping for breath as internal damage registered on his biometrics. Quilox's attack was more sophisticated. His bioluminescent organs flashed in complex patterns designed to disorient and confuse, but the attack required him to signal his intentions, and Nari's predator instincts read the pattern like a book. She launched herself off the nearest wall, intercepting his approach with a knee strike that ruptured several of his light-producing organs and sent him reeling in pain. Vorthak, seeing his companions defeated in seconds, tried to flee, but in zero gravity, retreat required the same careful movement as advance. Nari caught him before he reached the exit, delivering a precise strike to a Vorthak nerve cluster that Professor Jan had taught them about in xenobiology class. He went limp immediately, his nervous system temporarily paralyzed, 12 seconds. That was how long it took for one human cadet to neutralize 4 larger, stronger opponents who had every advantage except one. They had never learned to fight for their lives. Nari floated in the center of the corridor, breathing hard but uninjured. Around her, 4 alien cadets were unconscious or writhing in pain. Her combat instincts were still active, scanning for additional threats, but her rational mind was beginning to process what had just happened. The automated safety systems had registered the biometric spikes and were already activating emergency protocols. Lights came up throughout the section, and medical alerts began broadcasting on all frequencies. Within minutes, the area would be swarming with instructors and medical personnel. Nari looked at her hands. They weren't even shaking. That was perhaps the most frightening thing of all, how natural it had felt. 4 aliens had tried to hurt her, and her body had responded with efficient, devastating violence. No hesitation. No doubt, just pure predator instinct honed by millions of years of evolution on humanity's death world. She activated her recorder and began documenting the scene. The backup systems had captured everything despite the disabled personal units. The evidence would show the conspiracy, the planned assault, and her response. But it would also show exactly what humans were capable of when pushed too far. As the emergency teams arrived, Nari Kim floated among the casualties and wondered if she had just proven everything the aliens feared about her species. In 12 seconds, she had demonstrated that all their talk of civilization and evolved thinking meant nothing when survival was on the line. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you cornered a human, and Nari wasn't sure anyone was ready for that lesson. The medical bay was chaos. Dr. Soren, the Academy's chief medical officer, moved between 4 treatment beds with the efficiency of someone who had dealt with combat injuries for decades. His Threnody hands worked quickly, tending to wounds that should not have existed in a training exercise. Thexvel lay unconscious with a fractured arm and severe concussion. The force of his impact with the bulkhead had been precisely calculated to incapacitate without killing. Creton was conscious but struggling to breathe, his internal organs bruised from the elbow strike that had found exactly the right pressure point. Quilox floated in a specialized medical tank, his bioluminescent organs flickering weakly as they tried to repair themselves. Vorthak was paralyzed from the neck down, though Dr. Soren assured everyone it was temporary. Remarkable, Dr. Soren muttered as he reviewed the scan results. Each injury is perfectly targeted. Maximum incapacitation with minimal permanent damage. Whoever did this understood alien anatomy better than most medical students. Dean Mordeth stood at the center of the medical bay, his 4 arms gesturing angrily as he spoke into his communication device. I want that human expelled immediately. This level of violence is exactly what we feared when we allowed Deathworlders into the Academy. The recordings tell a different story, Instructor Kelnos replied, his Quillari body pulsing with uncomfortable patterns. The backup systems captured everything. This was a premeditated assault on Cadet Kim. She was defending herself. Defending herself? Dean Mordeth's voice rose to an indignant pitch. Look at the damage. 4 cadets in the medical bay because one human couldn't control her primitive instincts. Dr. Soren looked up from Quilox's treatment tank. Dean, I've seen real combat injuries. These wounds show restraint, not savagery. If Cadet Kim had wanted to kill these students, they would be dead. The political implications were staggering. Thexval's family controlled 3 star systems and had significant influence in the Federation Senate. Creton's clan was one of the oldest Threnody houses, with connections throughout the diplomatic corps. The incident would trigger investigations, hearings, and demands for answers that could destabilize human-alien relations for decades. Commander Gina Lee arrived 20 minutes after the emergency alert, still wearing her exercise uniform. She took one look at the medical bay and immediately understood the scope of the disaster. 4 alien cadets hospitalized by a single human would confirm every stereotype about Deathworlder violence. "Where is Cadet Kim?" she asked Instructor Kelnos. "Detention Block 3 awaiting investigation," he replied. "She came voluntarily and has been cooperative." Commander Lee nodded grimly. "I need to see those recordings." The evidence was damning and exonerating at the same time. The backup systems had captured the entire incident, including the conspirators' conversation and their coordinated attack. It clearly showed self-defense, but it also demonstrated the terrifying efficiency of human combat reflexes. 12 seconds to neutralize 4 opponents. It looked less like a fight and more like a predator disposing of prey. "Send a priority message to Earth Command," Commander Lee told her aide. "Admiral Choi needs to know about this immediately." Admiral Hyunwoo Choi was a legend in Federation military circles. He had commanded the defense of the Rigel colonies during the border wars, turning what should have been a massacre into a stunning victory through brilliant tactical thinking and sheer human stubbornness. His reputation for impossible victories had made him the highest-ranking human in Federation service, but it had also made him a target for those who feared human influence. The Admiral arrived at the Academy 18 hours later, his transport cutting through normal traffic patterns with the priority of a military emergency. He was a small man by human standards, barely average height with graying hair and quiet eyes that missed nothing. But when he walked into the Academy's administrative center, conversation stopped and aliens found excuses to be elsewhere. Dean Mordeth met him in the main conference room, flanked by several alien faculty members and a representative from the Federation's Internal Affairs Division. They had prepared their case carefully. This was an opportunity to demonstrate that humans were too dangerous for civilized military service. "Admiral Choi," Dean Mordeth began formally, "we appreciate your prompt response to this unfortunate incident. However, I must stress that this attack represents exactly the kind of behavior we have warned about regarding Deathworlder integration." "Attack?" Admiral Choi's voice was quiet, but something in his tone made the Dean hesitate. "I've reviewed the recordings. I saw an ambush by 4 cadets against one of my people. What I didn't see was an attack. 4 students are in the medical bay," the Internal Affairs representative interjected. "The level of violence was completely disproportionate to any perceived threat." Admiral Choi turned his attention to the bureaucrat. "Disproportionate?" 4 armed opponents in an enclosed space with recording devices disabled and no witnesses. In a real combat situation, that's called a death trap. Cadet Kim showed remarkable restraint by leaving them alive. The room fell silent. Dean Mordeth's crystalline features shifted through several colors as he processed the Admiral's words. "Surely you cannot approve of such savage behavior from a cadet under your command." "What I approve of," Admiral Choi said slowly, "is competence." Cadet Kim was attacked by 4 opponents, who had every advantage except one. They had never faced someone who understood that talk is cheap when someone is trying to hurt you. Commander Lee had been quiet during the exchange, but now she spoke up. "Admiral, there's something else. The investigation has revealed systematic harassment of all human cadets over the past month. This incident didn't happen in isolation." Admiral Choi's expression hardened. "Show me." The evidence was overwhelming. Disabled meal cards, altered schedules, restricted computer access, anonymous threats, all coordinated to make life miserable for human students. The pattern was clear, and it pointed to a conspiracy that went beyond individual prejudice. "Who authorized this harassment?" Admiral Choi asked. "No one authorized it," Dean Mordeth said quickly. "These were isolated incidents, technical glitches that only affected human cadets." Admiral Choi's voice carried the same tone he had used when demanding surrender from Krek's battleships. "Technical glitches that happened with clockwork regularity over a period of weeks?" The Internal Affairs representative shifted uncomfortably. This investigation was revealing systematic discrimination that could expose the Federation to charges of species-based persecution. The political ramifications would be enormous. Meanwhile, in Detention Block 3, Nari sat on her bunk and tried to process what had happened. The cell was comfortable enough, more like a hotel room than a prison, but the walls felt like they were closing in. She had done what any human would have done when cornered by multiple attackers. But she was beginning to understand that what seemed natural to her was terrifying to everyone else. Minho and the other human cadets had been allowed to visit, bringing news from outside. The alien student body was in an uproar, with some calling for all humans to be expelled and others quietly admitting that Thexval and his friends had gotten what they deserved. The faculty was split between those who saw the incident as proof of human savagery and those who recognized it as justified self-defense. "What's going to happen to me?" Nari asked during one of these visits. "Admiral Choi is here," Minho replied. "That's either very good news or very bad news, depending on how the politics play out." Professor Yeon visited later that evening, bringing dinner and an update on the investigation. "The evidence is clear," she said. "You were defending yourself against a coordinated assault. Any human court would call it justified." "But this isn't a human court," Nari replied. "No, it isn't. But Admiral Choi is making sure they understand the implications. If the Federation tolerates systematic harassment of human personnel, Earth might reconsider its participation in joint military operations." The threat was implicit, but clear. Humans provided a disproportionate amount of the Federation's combat effectiveness. Their willingness to fight when others preferred to negotiate had saved dozens of worlds over the past 50 years. If Earth withdrew its support, the Federation's military would be dangerously weakened. The hearing was scheduled for the following morning. Representatives from all major Federation species would attend, along with observers from Earth Command and several neutral parties. The decision would set precedent for how humans would be treated throughout Federation space. As Nari tried to sleep in her detention cell, she wondered if 12 seconds of violence had changed the course of galactic politics. She had acted on instinct, doing what any human would do when cornered. But in a galaxy that prized civilization over survival, her natural responses had become a political weapon. Outside her window, Nexus Prime continued its eternal storm, and somewhere in the Academy's corridors, beings from dozens of worlds prepared to judge whether humans belonged among the stars. The Academy's grand hearing chamber had never seen such a gathering. Representatives from all 47 Federation member species filled the curved rows of seats, their various forms creating a living rainbow of galactic diversity. In the center, a panel of senior officials prepared to hear testimony that could reshape human-alien relations for generations. Admiral Choi sat in the front row, his dress uniform bearing decorations from a dozen campaigns. Beside him, Ambassador Yunji represented Earth's diplomatic interests, her presence a reminder that this was more than an Academy disciplinary hearing. Behind them, the human cadets sat together, 12 young people whose futures hung in the balance. Nari stood at the defendant's podium, wearing her formal cadet uniform. She had spent the morning reviewing her testimony with Commander Lee, but no amount of preparation could ease the weight of hundreds of alien eyes examining her every move. She was no longer just a cadet facing punishment. She had become a symbol of everything the galaxy feared and needed about humanity. Chief Justice Velmak called the hearing to order, his ancient Kalari body pulsing with formal silver patterns. "We gather to examine the events of 3 days ago, when Cadet Kim Nari of Earth injured 4 fellow cadets during a training exercise. The question before us is not just what happened, but what it means for the future of interspecies cooperation." Dean Mordeth presented the case against Nari first. His argument was simple. Humans were inherently violent, and this incident proved they could not be trusted in civilized society. He displayed holographic images of the injured cadets, emphasizing the precision and efficiency of the damage. To alien eyes, it looked like the work of a trained killer, not a 19-year-old student. 4 students lie in our medical bay, Dean Mordeth declared, his forearms gesturing dramatically, injured by someone who was supposed to be their teammate. This is what happens when we allow predators into our institutions of learning. Deathworlders cannot be educated. They can only be contained. The alien audience murmured agreement. Many had always opposed human integration into Federation society, and this incident seemed to confirm their worst fears. Humans were useful in war but dangerous in peace. Better to keep them at arm's length and call them only when violence was needed. Then Admiral Choi rose to present the defense. He was a small figure compared to the towering aliens around him, but his presence filled the chamber. When he spoke, even his critics listened. "Honored representatives," he began, "you have heard about violence and predators. Let me tell you about something more important: survival. The Admiral activated a holographic display showing the galaxy's recent history. Battle sites, rescue operations, and defense actions scrolled past in a parade of human sacrifice. In the past 50 years, human forces have participated in 43 major military operations. In 38 of those operations, we provided the decisive factor that prevented defeat, not because we were more violent than our allies, but because we understood something they had forgotten. He paused, letting the statistics sink in. The universe does not care about our philosophies. Physics doesn't negotiate. When a star goes nova, it doesn't matter how civilized you are. When pirates attack a colony ship, children die while you're debating the ethics of response. Humans understand this because our world taught us that survival comes first, and everything else comes second. The chamber was silent now, hanging on every word. Admiral Choi continued. 3 days ago, 4 cadets attempted to ambush one of my people. They disabled recording devices, isolated their target, and coordinated an assault designed to cause serious injury. In doing so, they created exactly the kind of life or death situation that humans are evolved to handle. But the response was disproportionate. Dean Mordeth protested, was it? Admiral Choi turned to face the Dean directly. 4 armed opponents against 1 defender, in an environment where help was impossible and escape was blocked. Tell me, Dean, what would be a proportionate response to attempted murder? The word murder sent shockwaves through the chamber. The alien representatives shifted uncomfortably as they realized the implications. This hadn't been a training accident or a disciplinary problem. It had been a calculated attempt to severely injure or kill a fellow cadet. Ambassador Yoon-ji rose to address the gathering. She was elegant and composed. Everything that galactic society expected from a diplomat, but her words carried steel beneath the silk. Distinguished colleagues, she began. Earth joined the Federation because we believed in the dream of peaceful cooperation among species. But peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of justice. When justice fails, when the strong prey upon the weak without consequence, then peace becomes merely the privilege of the powerful. She gestured toward Nari. This young woman did not seek conflict. She endured weeks of systematic harassment, trying to fit into your definition of civilized behavior. Only when cornered and attacked did she respond with the capabilities her evolution provided. You call this violence. We call it justice. The testimony continued for hours. Dr. Soren explained the precise nature of the injuries, emphasizing how they demonstrated restraint rather than savagery. Commander Lee detailed the harassment campaign that had preceded the incident. Professor Yeon described Nari's academic performance and character, painting a picture of someone trying desperately to belong. But the turning point came when an unexpected witness took the stand. Instructor Kelnos, the Quilari combat veteran, had remained silent throughout the investigation. Now he floated to the witness podium, his scarred body pulsing with solemn patterns. I have fought in 3 wars, he said quietly. I have seen what real violence looks like. What happened in that training dome was not violence, it was artistry. Cadet Kim neutralized 4 threats with surgical precision, using exactly the force necessary and no more. In my species' military tradition, we would call this the highest form of combat skill. He paused, letting his words resonate. But more importantly, she showed mercy. A true predator would have killed them all and made it look like an accident. Instead, she left them alive to face justice. This is not the action of a savage. It is the action of someone who understands that strength must be tempered with honor. The chamber erupted in discussion. If a respected Quilari veteran was defending human actions, it changed the entire narrative. This wasn't about violent Deathworlders running amok. It was about justified self-defense by someone who could have done much worse. Chief Justice Velmak called for closing arguments. Dean Mordeth made one final plea for Nari's expulsion, warning that allowing this incident to go unpunished would encourage more violence. But his words sounded hollow after Instructor Kelnos' testimony. Admiral Choi's closing statement was brief but devastating. You have a choice, he told the assembly. You can punish Cadet Kim for defending herself, proving that the Federation tolerates harassment and assault as long as the victims are human. Or you can uphold the principles of justice that supposedly bind us together. Choose carefully. The galaxy is watching. The deliberation lasted 3 hours. When the panel returned, Chief Justice Velmak's announcement sent shockwaves through the chamber. After careful consideration of all evidence, this panel finds that Cadet Kim Nari acted in justified self-defense against a coordinated assault. All charges are dismissed, and she is commended for showing remarkable restraint in a life-threatening situation. The chamber exploded in chaos. Some species cheered while others protested angrily, but the decision was final, and its implications were clear. Humans would be judged by their actions, not their species. The real changes came in the weeks that followed. Dean Mordeth resigned in disgrace, replaced by a coalition leadership that included Commander Lee as the new Dean of Combat Studies. The 4 conspirators faced serious disciplinary action, with Thexval expelled and the others suspended. More importantly, their family's political influence was severely damaged by the scandal. New protocols were established to prevent discrimination and ensure fair treatment of all species. The Academy's curriculum was revised to include mandatory courses on interspecies cooperation and the value of diversity. What had begun as an attempt to drive humans away had instead forced the Federation to confront its own prejudices. 6 months later, Nari stood before a mixed-species tactical team, leading them through a complex training exercise. The team included former adversaries who now trusted her judgment, having learned that strength and honor were not mutually exclusive. She had become what Admiral Choi always knew she could be, not just a survivor, but a leader. Minho had emerged as the top student in diplomatic studies, his natural charisma helping to bridge gaps between species. Yunho's quiet observations had led to breakthrough insights in multi-species military doctrine. Hana's engineering skills had revolutionized several academy systems, proving that human innovation was as valuable as human courage. The 12 seconds that had changed everything were now taught as a case study in tactical response and ethical leadership. Future cadets learned not just about the incident itself, but about the importance of standing up for what was right, even when the odds seemed impossible.